How the limitless Saudi royal wealth is spent. Here's the thing people miss when they talk about Saudi royal wealth. This isn't money chasing comfort. This is money eliminating friction. For Prince Mohammed bin Salman's family, luxury isn't a reward or an escape. It's the baseline environment in which decisions get made. Growing up inside the House of Saud means never learning the mental habit of budgeting the way normal people do. Not because they're reckless, but because constraints simply aren't part of the equation. When you're deciding where to sleep, you're not comparing prices or neighborhoods. You're choosing between palaces based on purpose. One residence for hosting heads of state, another designed for isolation and privacy, another reserved entirely for family life. Each space is staffed, climate-controlled, and maintained year-round, whether it's occupied or not. These aren't showpieces built to impress tourists. They're operational assets. Italian marble floors aren't chosen because they sparkle. They're chosen because they last generations. Ceilings aren't decorated for Instagram. They're hand-carved to echo lineage. Even mundane objects quietly reflect scale. Gold-plated fixtures aren't extravagances when gold is cheaper than logistics at this level. They're just durable materials. And all of this is underwritten by something very specific: oil. Saudi Aramco isn't just a company. It's the financial engine that allowed the royal family to transition from wealthy rulers into global power brokers. When Aramco was valued around $2 trillion, it redefined what liquid capital meant for a single family. This is why MBS didn't inherit wealth so much as inherit reach. What's interesting is what he did next. Instead of shrinking that reach to stay comfortable, he expanded it into spaces that money alone can't usually access: oceans, art history, and cultural memory. That's where this stops being about luxury and starts being about control. Floating palaces, the yachts that redefined luxury. There's a psychological shift that happens when someone decides land is no longer enough. For Prince Salman's family, that shift surfaced clearly with their yachts not as indulgent toys, but as mobile sovereign spaces. When Pegasus entered the picture in 2014, it wasn't described internally as a yacht. It was treated like a floating residence. Its design wasn't about visibility from the shore, but about internal experience. The interiors leaned unapologetically royal: gold-accented halls, custom-built seating meant to resemble thrones more than furniture, and carpets dense enough to dampen footsteps. Privacy mattered. Sound mattered. Even the lighting was calibrated to avoid fatigue during long stretches at sea. Each stateroom functioned like a private apartment, complete with oversized bathrooms and bespoke finishes. The spa wasn't decorative. It used 24-karat gold-infused oils sourced for long-term skin treatment. The gym wasn't symbolic. It rivaled elite training centers. Maintaining Pegasus alone cost millions annually. But maintenance at this level isn't upkeep, it's preservation. Then came Serene. Purchased in 2015 for roughly $550 million, Serene didn't replace Pegasus, it eclipsed it. At 134 meters long, it blurred the line between yacht and floating estate. It housed up to 24 guests in suites designed for long-term habitation, not weekend novelty. Multiple pools, a full cinema, dual helipads, and perhaps most tellingly, a submarine. Not a gimmick. A functional vessel for underwater exploration. Refits in Dutch shipyards weren't cosmetic. They were complete overhauls, updating systems, interiors, and security. These yachts weren't frozen in time. They evolved alongside the prince's ambitions. And then something quietly radical happened. One of the most valuable objects in human history entered this orbit. Buying history, art, castles, and private masterpieces. In 2017, the art world didn't just gasp, it recalculated. Salvator Mundi, attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, sold for $450 million after a ferocious, behind-the-scenes bidding war. For months, the buyer's identity stayed hidden. When it emerged that Prince Mohammed bin Salman was behind the purchase, the reaction wasn't outrage, it was unease. Because this wasn't a collector flexing taste, this was a ruler acquiring history. Salvator Mundi isn't powerful because of paint and canvas. It's powerful because it represents scarcity that can never be replicated. Owning it places you in a category beyond wealth, into custodianship of civilization's artifacts. The rumors that followed, suggesting the painting might be displayed aboard Serene, weren't shocking, they were perfectly on brand. Why donate a masterpiece to a museum when your private space already functions like one? That same logic carried directly into real estate. The purchase of Chateau Louis XIV near Versailles for around $320 million wasn't nostalgia, it was narrative control. The estate was built to echo 17th-century grandeur, but beneath the surface sat modern infrastructure. App-controlled systems, indoor pools with cascading ceilings, wine cellars holding thousands of bottles, and an underwater meditation room surrounded by koi and sturgeon. This wasn't about living like Louis XIV. It was about signaling continuity, power, translating seamlessly across centuries. By this point, the pattern is undeniable. Prince Salman's family doesn't collect objects. They collect environments that reinforce permanence. Sea, land, art, all aligned under one philosophy. If you can remove limitation entirely, why wouldn't you? And next, that same philosophy starts reshaping industries, sports, and global influence in ways far bigger than personal luxury. Moving power, jets, supercars, and total mobility. Once you understand how Prince Salman's family lives at rest, the next logical question is how they move. And the answer is, like a state, not an individual. Let's start on the ground. The car collection associated with Prince Mohammed bin Salman isn't a garage in the traditional sense, it's a rotating fleet. Vehicles come in and out depending on use, symbolism, and location. The Bugatti Chiron alone tells you everything about the mindset. Capable of over 260 miles per hour, engineered with aerospace-grade materials, and priced north of $3 million. It's less a car and more a rolling statement about control over physics. Speed, in this context, isn't about thrill, it's about mastery. Then you've got the Lamborghini Aventador for raw aggression, the McLaren P1 for technological elegance, and Rolls-Royce Phantoms for moments when silence, not speed, matters. These cars aren't driven to be seen. They're deployed when the situation calls for a certain presence. That distinction matters. But the real shift happens in the air. The custom Airbus A380 owned by the royal family isn't transportation, it's a flying compound. At an estimated cost of around $450 million before customization, it features private suites, conference rooms, a Turkish-style bath, and enough interior space to host full delegations mid-flight. There are persistent reports of a vehicle storage area on board. Because at this level, continuity matters. You land, you move exactly as you would have elsewhere. The Boeing 747, similarly modified, functions as a secondary airborne headquarters. These jets aren't about indulgence, they're about eliminating downtime. When decision-makers never need to arrive tired, power compounds faster. Movement, for Prince Salman's family, is not a logistical concern, it's an extension of governance. When you can cross continents without interruption, borders stop feeling solid, and that mindset bleeds directly into how investments, diplomacy, and ambition unfold next. Buying influence without owning the spotlight. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Prince Mohammed bin Salman's wealth is how quietly it reshapes global culture. Take sports, for instance. When Saudi Arabia, through the Public Investment Fund, acquired Newcastle United for roughly $388 million, it wasn't a vanity purchase. It was infrastructure. Football isn't just entertainment, it's the most efficient emotional distribution network on earth. A club with history, frustration, and loyalty already baked in is far more valuable than starting something new. And once the ownership stabilized, the strategy became clear. Smart acquisitions, high-impact players, a patient rebuild instead of a flashy sugar rush. Newcastle wasn't meant to win overnight, it was meant to matter again. Zoom out, and the same thinking appears everywhere. Formula One races in Saudi Arabia, major boxing bouts, tennis tournaments, LIV golf. These weren't random splurges, they were coordinated moves to reposition Saudi Arabia as culturally unavoidable. If the world was going to talk anyway, it might as well talk on Saudi-owned stages. This is all powered by the Public Investment Fund, which now manages assets approaching $800 billion. Through it, Prince Salman's influence touches tech, entertainment, logistics, hospitality, and infrastructure. Uber, gaming companies, international real estate. These aren't bets, they're anchors. What's striking is how rarely the prince places himself at the emotional center of these moves. The institutions act, the funds execute, the narrative unfolds. That restraint is intentional. True power doesn't argue for attention. It designs environments where attention flows naturally. And that same philosophy shows up even in moments that look like generosity. Charity as signal, not apology. Philanthropy, in the Saudi royal context, operates differently from Western celebrity charity. It isn't branding, it's positioning. Prince Mohammed bin Salman's charitable footprint is enormous, but it's also targeted. Through the Misk Foundation, he's poured resources into education, entrepreneurship, arts, and technology not as relief, but as acceleration. Misk schools emphasize leadership and global competitiveness. Misk Innovation funds startups meant to survive internationally, not just domestically. Then there's Asan, the digital charity platform backed directly by King Salman and the Crown Prince. With hundreds of millions distributed and millions of beneficiaries, it's designed for scale and transparency, a system, not a campaign. The message is subtle but clear. Generosity here is institutional, not emotional. Internationally, Saudi aid under Prince Salman has reached Rohingya refugees, Syrians, Yemenis, Palestinians, and African nations dealing with instability. These figures aren't symbolic. We're talking billions in humanitarian and development assistance over time. Whether viewed through a humanitarian or geopolitical lens, the effect is the same presence. Even personal gestures follow this logic. Paying off prisoners' debts, gifting Rolls-Royces to national football players after historic wins. These moments aren't random kindness. They reinforce loyalty, morale, and narrative. But charity alone doesn't explain the transformation underway. That requires understanding the reforms reshaping Saudi society itself. Vision 2030 and the bet on the future. All of this, the luxury, the assets, the influence feeds into one central project, Vision 2030. Prince Mohammed bin Salman isn't trying to preserve Saudi Arabia as it was. He's trying to outpace the moment oil stops being enough. That's why women driving wasn't symbolic, it was economic. That's why entertainment returned, it was cultural infrastructure. That's why tourism, sports, and gaming matter, they diversify relevance. And then there's NEOM, a trillion-dollar experiment stretching across 170 kilometers, designed to house 9 million people in vertically integrated urban systems. The line, its most ambitious component, isn't just architecture, it's a provocation. What if cities were designed for efficiency first, not nostalgia? Renewable energy, autonomous transit, zero cars, radical density. Critics see hubris, supporters see inevitability. Either way, NEOM signals something important. Prince Salman isn't optimizing for approval, he's optimizing for legacy. This is the through line people miss. The yachts, the art, the palaces, they're expressions of a deeper belief that scale changes possibility. When money, movement, culture, and policy align, the future stops being abstract. It becomes something you build. And whether the world is ready or not, Prince Mohammed bin Salman is spending accordingly.